The video will start.
Hello everyone, and welcome to Geneva Peace Week. The Geneva Peace Week team extends a warm welcome to all of the speakers and attendees who are joining us for this year's forum. For the past 7 years, we have come together each year to dissect the parameters of peace processes and to repackage them in innovative ways to adapt to an evolving and complex security environment. But this year is special in more ways than one. In the wake of the pandemic, our commitment to peace has become more urgent than ever. Your presence here today reaffirms that even though geography can divide us, we are united by our collective vision of rebuilding hope and trust in such difficult times. This year also presents us with an exciting opportunity for us to hear local voices on peace building. And with that, let's turn to all of you around the world who shared with us what peace means to you.
Peace is taking care of one another's well-being, and trust is knowing that other people feel the same way.
Peace is human security. في سلام كرامة الإنسان.
Peace means evolving in a context where each citizen has a chance to reach his full potential safely.
La confiance, c'est le dialogue. Nous pouvons construire la confiance dans la communication, la paix et l'amour.
La paz es dignidad, bienestar para todos, no solo ausencia de guerra.
Amani ni wanawake, wasichana, watoto kuishi bila hofu yoyote.
Peace is what makes our world go round, so let's give peace a chance.
The values of respect, care, empathy, and nonviolence lay at the foundations of peace work, and they lay at the foundations of trust. These values need to be practiced, cultivated, and reinforced in all aspects of our lives, including in our peace-building work. The theme of Geneva Peace Week 2020 is rebuilding trust after disruption. And so we asked you, what does trust mean?
Podemos generar confianza aportando con nuestras decisiones individuales a la construcción de un mundo más justo y equitativo para todos.
Trust is knowing that our representatives and leaders will do the right thing.
Podemos construir confianza en la educación. Si hay educación, hay justicia, y si hay justicia, hay paz.
Trust is a leap of faith that comes from the heart and from integrity.
We can build trust by teaching the youth how to legally demand accountability from elected officials.
And whether it's on a personal level or a political level, it requires keeping your promises.
We build trust by grieving our losses and coming together as a community to heal.
We have 5 very well-filled days planned for you, filled with storytelling, workshops, skill transfer sessions, historical reflections, and networking opportunities too. Thank you for showing up to join the conversation. The quest for peace begins at home. It begins with you.
We hope you enjoy our live sessions and digital series throughout the week. Don't forget to download the Geneva Peace Week app and be sure to join us for the closing ceremony on Friday the 6th of November from 3:30 till 5 p.m. Central European Time.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the opening ceremony of Geneva Peace Week 2020. I am Dan Singicini, and together with my colleague Claudia Seymour, we are looking forward to moderating the opening ceremony for you.
We have an outstanding program lined up for you in the coming hour. We'll have formal words of welcome, the opening roundtable, as well as moments of reflection with artistic interventions. But before we get started, allow us to highlight 2 important issues.
We would like to underline the exceptional sense of partnership that is behind this opening ceremony, and indeed behind Geneva Peace Week. We want to thank all the institutions behind me, the directors and their many colleagues that have enabled Geneva Peace Week to evolve over the last 7 years.
We also want to thank all of the 280 partner organizations that have organized live sessions and created content for the new digital series, representing a true wealth of activities that are being showcased throughout this year. Geneva Peace Week would not exist without you, and we are grateful. I would also like to recognize the Geneva Peace Week 2020 team that has worked above and beyond the call of duty to bring Geneva Peace Week to you. Here we have, in addition to me and Danson, Akim Wenman, Annika Erickson-Pearson, Catherine Giccini, Irina Sorokina, and Simran Singh. We are also extremely grateful to the virtual assistants who made all the live sessions possible in terms of technology. We have Jamie Wang, Jana Sirkoska, Kimberly Evans, Milena Nyhaus, Ophelie Schar, Risa Nishida, Sarah Ramo, and Jen Lee. Finally, we would like to note with appreciation that the Geneva Peace Week 2020 is being powered by the Eventry Event Management Technology Platform. Their integrated platform has enabled the development of the Geneva Peace Week registration, the app, networking features, website, and much more.
And finally, thank you to all of the 2,800 participants who are engaging in this week. 1,800 of you have joined Geneva Peace Week for the first time. Participants this week will be joining live sessions from over 170 countries all across the world. Ladies and gentlemen, it is now my honor and privilege to invite Tatiana Valovaya, the Director General of the United Nations Office at Geneva, to deliver her opening remarks.
Thank you very much. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, dear friends, it is my greatest pleasure to open the 2020 edition of the Geneva Peace Week. As in previous years, the week is organized jointly by the Graduate Institute of International Development Studies, the Geneva Peacebuilding Platform, and the United Nations Office in Geneva, with the support of the Swiss Confederation. And I wholeheartedly thank our partners for making this a truly cross-cutting initiative taking place online for the first time. This week's overall theme, Rebuilding Trust After Disruption, could not be timelier and more relevant. The COVID-19 pandemic indeed continues to unsettle our world. The erosion of trust in public institutions, unequal access to health care, and tensions around delicate peace negotiations are among the risks amplified by COVID-19, which, if not mitigated, could push more continents into violence. It is against this background that Secretary General Guterres has repeatedly called for a global ceasefire. Despite his appeal, conflicts continue in many places around the world, such as Yemen, Syria, or Mali. But there are some glimmers of hope. Even in these most challenging times, peace-building efforts continue. And only a few days ago, a fundamental step towards peace and stability in Libya was made following the signing of a ceasefire agreement here in Geneva at the Palais des Nations. And this month, we will host, hopefully, at the Palais des Nations, the 2020 Afghanistan Conference. This major event will provide an important opportunity for the Afghan government and the international community to commit to common objectives for promoting sustainable development, prosperity, and lasting peace in Afghanistan. In the past months, we have seen creative initiatives to rebuild trust and promote peace, from tackling misinformation, connecting communities online, and fighting discrimination through global social media campaigns. Here in Geneva, we have launched new initiatives for cyber mediation and adapted various important international conflict resolution processes to a hybrid format. Our United Nations 75 initiative, organized throughout the year to mark the 75th anniversary of the United Nations, is another signal of confidence. Settling conflicts and ending violence is among the top priorities identified by the respondents, our ordinary citizens. The results also demonstrate that the majority of people want greater international cooperation in order to successfully build peace. We therefore need to press ahead with our efforts, showcase the value of effective partnerships for peace building, and promote new ideas and success stories. The Geneva Peace Week 2020 is the perfect vehicle to help us achieving these objectives. Taking place online, the week will reach a worldwide audience, and this year 280 session organizers from all over the world will contribute to the discussions. We will have over 70 live sessions featuring cutting-edge discussions on climate change and peace, women in peace building, or cyber peace. Also, our new digital series contain a multitude of innovative media products that will outlive this event. And I invite you all to dive into the rich program of this week. I would also like to say that, for example, in my native language, which is Russian, we have only one word both for peace and world. When I say in Russian mir, it can mean peace and world. And I think that's really important to make peace equal to world and to make world equal to peace, because we really need peace reigning in the world. I wish you inspiring Geneva Peace Week 2020. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Director General, for these inspiring words and your vision. Allow me now to welcome to the screen Ambassador Jörg Lauber, Permanent Representative of Switzerland to the United Nations Office and other international organizations in Geneva.
Thank you much. Thank you, Claudia and Tansen. Madame la Directrice Générale de l'Office des Nations Unies à Genève, Messieurs les maires de Genève et de Palerme, chers et chers collègues, à toutes et à tous, au nom de la Suisse, je vous souhaite la bienvenue à la Semaine de la paix de Genève 2020. Avec la pandémie du Covid-19, nous vivons un traumatisme collectif. La crise sanitaire, sociale et économique aux dimensions globales est une rupture saisissante. Elle montre que nous sommes tous connectés, mais nous éloigne les uns des autres. Elle fait quelques gagnants et surtout beaucoup de perdants. Par ailleurs, cette crise n'entraîne pas les mêmes conséquences partout, pour tous. La situation est encore plus dure là où il y a déjà des fractures causées par les conflits, la fragilité et l'exclusion. Alors comment construire ou plutôt reconstruire la confiance et mieux coopérer? Voici en style plutôt télégraphique 6 pistes de réflexion. 1. La confiance se reconstruit, se construit jour après jour, en continu, entre gouvernements, entre populations, entre personnes. Elle est faite de connaissance de l'autre et de respect. Cela signifie aussi respect des droits de l'homme universels, élément clé de la prévention des conflits. 2. La confiance nécessite souvent des relations personnelles. Le virtuel nous connecte, mais cela ne suffit pas. C'est tout notamment le cas dans des processus de paix. Et la directrice générale l'a mentionné, le cessez-le-feu signé il y a 10 jours à Genève par les belligérants libyens sous l'égide de l'ONU est un exemple de succès de rencontres face à face. La Suisse continuera donc à proposer ses bons offices et à faire en sorte que les belligérants puissent se rencontrer dans des espaces protégés, même pendant cette période de pandémie. 3. La confiance se construit en écoutant l'autre et en parlant sa langue. C'est pourquoi, autant que possible, j'encourage le multilinguisme. 4. Rebuilding trust and cooperation requires leadership at all levels of governance. This is why we support an inclusive governance in Geneva, which makes it possible to associate the energies of different actors and brings out concrete, useful, and applicable solutions at the global, regional, and local level. 5. Confidence and cooperation are built by establishing common rules that ensure functioning international relations and provide a framework of protection for each human being. Here in Geneva, we have a responsibility, but also the opportunity to make multilateralism work. And 6, in a complex environment, one must have the will to be coherent and to cooperate in order to support peace. Therefore, Switzerland promotes a comprehensive understanding of peace and security, which links peace, development, and human rights, and involves collaboration with the humanitarian and disarmament communities. Director General, Mayors, Excellencies, dear colleagues, I would now like to thank the Geneva Peacebuilding Platform and all the partners who made this week a reality. Through your efforts, we benefit from a unique space devoted to peace, a space to connect and exchange across borders, across professional horizons and hierarchies. I wish you a fruitful Peace Week to all of you and to all of us. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup, Ambassador Lauber. Allow me at this stage to thank you, as well as the continuous support of the Swiss Confederation for the Geneva Peacebuilding Platform and Geneva Peace Week. It's my pleasure now to welcome to the stage and to pass the floor to the Mayor of Geneva, Sami Kana.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Directrice Générale des Nations Unies, Monsieur l'Ambassadeur, chers collègues de Palerme, Mesdames et Messieurs, chers partenaires et chers amis. C'est aussi pour moi un privilège et un honneur de vous dire quelques mots, même si c'est par voie virtuelle. J'aimerais d'abord remercier effectivement la Geneva Peacebuilding Platform qui a tenu bon avec ses partenaires pour organiser cette semaine malgré les obstacles. Je crois que c'est crucial de garder le contact. Comme l'a dit l'ambassadeur Lauber, nous préférons le garder par voie physique et présentielle, mais au moins par voie numérique, ça permet d'échanger. Et je crois qu'il est vital, malgré le Covid, aussi de créer des espaces où nous pouvons nous rencontrer malgré les complications, parce que rien ne remplace un contact direct. Vous ne serez pas surpris si j'insiste dans le cadre du traumatisme, effectivement, que nous traversons en ce moment, qui, dans beaucoup de cas d'ailleurs, ne fait qu'amplifier des problèmes existants, des problèmes d'inégalité sociale, des problèmes de migration mal gérée et douloureuse, les problèmes climatiques bien sûr, même si à court terme le Covid réduit un peu l'empreinte carbone. Mais c'est vrai que pour notre planète, le Covid-19 est à la fois un problème pour lui-même et un formidable amplificateur d'autres problèmes. C'est aussi parfois un tout petit peu une opportunité parce qu'on a vu émerger beaucoup d'idées intéressantes, beaucoup d'opportunités de collaboration et de solidarité. Et c'est souvent le fait des communautés locales. C'est souvent le fait du travail concret sur le terrain, autour des communautés locales au sens large, avec les gouvernements locaux, municipaux et régionaux, qui ont dû souvent prendre le relais, ou en tout cas compléter l'action des États, qui était parfois incomplète, et c'est pas une critique, c'est un constat, et puis amener des solutions concrètes, immédiates, aux effets induits de la crise, pas seulement sur le plan strictement sanitaire, mais comme on l'a dit, sur le plan des solidarités. Même dans un pays riche comme la Suisse, dans une ville riche comme Genève, on a vu apparaître au grand jour des groupes entiers de la population qui avaient des besoins urgents, vraiment vitaux. On parle de nourriture, d'un logement, et qui, même dans la riche Genève, ont vécu la crise comme une rupture totale et un traumatisme direct et réel. Alors les solidarités ont pu fonctionner, et c'est souvent le cas d'organisations non gouvernementales concrètes sur le terrain avec l'appui des villes, de la ville de Genève par exemple. Mais on voit aussi des tensions entre les générations qui m'inquiètent beaucoup, parce qu'on considère les personnes âgées comme un risque, et du coup les jeunes sont considérés comme des vecteurs de la maladie, mais en même temps ils veulent aussi pouvoir exister. Des tensions entre les gens d'ici et les gens d'ailleurs. Donc effectivement les risques sont importants, et il faut absolument les renverser en opportunités. Donc j'insiste une fois plus, et je sais que je parle à une audience qui est convaincue du principe, il faut vraiment intégrer les communautés locales dans la discussion, aussi bien dans la gestion de l'urgence à court terme que de la résilience à long terme, pour, comme l'a dit l'ambassadeur Lauber, comme l'a dit Mme Valovaya, construire des liens de confiance, de respect, de connaissance mutuelle. Quand on se connaît en général, on se respecte mieux, et ça c'est absolument vital. Donc les villes doivent pouvoir être intégrées dans la discussion multilatérale et multiniveau, comme partenaires de plein pot avec l'ensemble des communautés locales. Je remercie encore une fois la Peacebuilding Platform, Geneva Peacebuilding Platform, de nous offrir cette opportunité, et je souhaite des échanges aussi fructueux que possible pour cette semaine, malgré qu'elle est virtuelle. Un grand merci à toutes et tous.
Merci beaucoup, Mayor Kanan, pour votre message si interpellant et si important. We're all grateful to you as well for the support that the city of Geneva gives to the work of peace in Geneva and in the world. Now, with the generous support of the UNESCO Geneva Liaison Office, we are delighted to share with you a story brought to you by Casilda. Casilda is a world-renowned storyteller who strongly believes in the power of stories to transform the world's oral traditions to collective wisdom for peace. Casilda seeks simplicity and authenticity to bring stories alive, to transport her listeners to imaginary worlds of magic and wonder. Here she starts with a little drop of honey.
Someone had spilled a drop of honey in a farmyard. A bee was buzzing around the drop of honey. Suddenly, the farm's cat saw the bee, jumped in the air, and caught the bee in his mouth. The bee stung the cat, and so the cat began to screech and to run in circles. At that moment, a shepherd was passing by the farm. When the shepherd's dog saw the cat screeching and running in circles, he lost control of himself, ran into the farm and killed the cat. The farmer was very fond of his cat, and when he saw it killed by that dog, he went to the farm, pulled out his gun and shot the dog. The shepherd loved his dog, and when he saw it killed, he simply pulled out his knife and stabbed the farmer. The farmer had 3 sons, and when they saw their father being killed, they ran out of the farm and they killed the shepherd. But the shepherd had 3 sons too, and when they heard that their father had been murdered, they came running into the farm, and a terrible fight began, during which the 6 young men died. Watching all of this from a hill nearby was an old woman with her grandson. Terrified at the sight of this bloodshed, the little boy turned to the old lady and said, "Grandma, tell me, what will happen next?" "Ah," said the old woman, "my dear, that I cannot tell you. The only thing I can tell you is that it all began with a little drop of honey."
A little drop of honey that triggers seemingly unstoppable violence and death. This is the reality of many people around the world that are experiencing violence and insecurity. It is also the work environment and the vocation for peace builders to address. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, and welcome to the opening discussion of Geneva Peace Week. I'm Achim Wennmann with the Geneva Peacebuilding Platform and the Graduate Institute of International and Development Studies, and I'll be the moderator of this afternoon's discussion. We will be focusing on 2 questions. How do we rebuild trust after disruptions, such as the disruptions we just heard, triggered by a drop of honey? And how do we reset international cooperation, also thinking about what is the value added of international Geneva, where we are here? We have a stellar panel with us that will unpack different perspectives on these questions. We're having Pierre Hazan, who's Senior Advisor for the Center for Humanitarian Dialogue. We have the Mayor of Palermo, Leoluca Orlando. We have Marie Lorsal, the new Director of the Graduate Institute of International and Development Study. We have Paolo Camassa, the Deputy Mayor of Palermo, and also a former graduate of the Graduate Institute. We have Maria Luisa Silva, the Director of UNDP in Geneva, and Ambassador Jörg Lauber, who's joining us after his opening remarks. So let us get straight into the discussion. And Pierre, perhaps we can start with you. You have been perhaps in the heart of some of the storms where conflict and violence has ruptured trust and has really, you have seen these consequences of these little drops of honey in front of your eyes. How do you approach, as a peace mediator, the issue of rebuilding trust after monumental disruptions?
Good afternoon, Achim. Thank you for this enormous question. Let me be very concrete. And I just would like to start with a simple experience I had in one part of Sahel, in the Difa region, which is in front of Nigeria, but it's in Niger. So it's where Boko Haram has been extremely effective, has been destroying, plundering, and so on, and bringing a lot of terrible tragedies to a lot of people. And in this part of Niger, Difa, which is basically 4 times the size of Switzerland, for 500,000 of inhabitants, you have not only one conflict, but many conflicts. And for me, that's very important, because you need to deal not only with Boko Haram, you need to deal with all the other conflicts which are being associated with Boko Haram. Because of Boko Haram, for instance, you have less resources because Boko Haram has been very present in the Lake Chad and along the river Kamagudu, meaning that the richest soil, it's not accessible anymore. Then you have 40% of the population which became IDPs. So again, we are becoming dependent. And because of a lack of resources, then you have a lot of tensions between herders and farmers. So you see how all these different conflicts escalate. Then you add another factor, which is the demographic bomb. You have 7.2 children per woman. So when you start to pile all these different layers, you start to understand that you need to deal not only with one phenomenon, but with basically all of them, but with very different tools. One tool will be to try to improve the justice system. And then you realize, with the help of the authorities, that between 50 and 80% of the people who have been arrested actually were innocent, or there was no evidence against them. So you really tried, and by freeing them, you decrease the level of tension within the society. Then you realize that a lot of people were very suspicious about the people who were put in trial in Niamey. Niamey is 1,600 kilometers from Difa region. So again, the people don't know what's happening in the capital. So we try to bring the trial back to Difa region. But in doing so, there was some security risks, but it was also quite complicated technically. So you see, then we tried to make some peace agreements, and actually were able to do so between different communities. So to make it short, we have to use very different tools at different levels. Some will be more geared toward mediation, more will be to support justice system, and so on. And this through different tools that sometimes you will satisfy the needs of a population. And just maybe let me add something. It's the question of despair. One day, a year ago, I remember talking to an old lady. She had 10 children. 7 of them joined Boko Haram. And so because they were following actually the older son, and she said to me, it was like having a snake I was carrying a snake, not a child. And what she was saying in reality for me is the level of despair. What can you do when you have a sense of future which is not very clear, when you don't see any prospect of the future. So you need to address all these different problems, going to psychological and to ambitions, to real concrete support to some state institutions.
Thank you, Per. And with your comments also, you, in a sense, you describe a transformation of the peace mediation world in itself, from a practice that was very much designed to drive processes with armed groups, and that all of a sudden have to respond to this tremendous complexity of the conflicts in front of them, not just with the armed groups, but also with the engagement of so many different constituencies in a society. And I remember the documentary that you were part of, and I remember the face of that woman in the documentary that had its 7 children, part of Boko Haram. And it is exactly this image that stays very vivid to me, to ask, and perhaps to ask you, how can you rebuild trust in the face of so much despair? What can the outsider really do?
I think, one thing we started to do, and for me it's always a very good lesson, we started to do a survey. We interviewed more than 600 people in this region and focus groups. And then we started to understand the different layers, the tension between the population and the states and the authorities, the tensions between the communities, the expectations of the youth, this feeling of no future, the question of reaching resources, the problems of the IDPs. And it's basing by reaching out to the population that we also understood from themselves what the tools were in order to deal with their problems.
Thank you. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I'm now turning to you who are following this conversation online. The YouTube channel on which you follow this conversation does have a chat function. And if you are inspired by what you hear, please add your voice to the conversation or ask your questions to some of our panelists as we go forward. And we have my colleague Claudia, who's going to bring your questions into the discussion at a later moment. Pierre, what you says, I'm sure, has a lot of resonance for Mayor Leoluca Orlando. The problem of giving youth a vision, the problem of dealing with a lot of complexity at the same time. From refugee flows, the list is so long that I don't even want to start enumerating it. Leoluca, how you as a mayor, how do you go about with this issue of trust building after all this disruption? COVID is just now one. Many people have lost loved ones. How do you see your role as a mayor in this process of trust building? You need to please unmute yourself.
Hello, good afternoon. Hello to all of you. I wish to say hello to moderator Hakim Kenman. This is the opening ceremony for Peace Week 2020. I think that I have to say thanks for invitation and invitation. I have to say just send my warm greetings to Sami Kanan. Just saying that I feel Swiss for my many presences in Switzerland, and even being born on 1st August, that you know is a very important day for the country. But I come from Palermo, and Palermo is not European city. Palermo is a Middle East town in Europe. It means it's Mediterranean, not only European. And my opinion about trust is that we can promote trust. We have to promote trust just sharing a language. I think that this initiative, and I wish to say my appreciation for this initiative, is to try to let us to sign a language agreement, just to use the same language, because I trust on people speaking my language. I do not trust on people being on my side but not speaking my language. So let's have different opinions, but let's share language. So I wish to remember Mir, that means peace and world, as Tatiana Voloyeva has said. And back to me, you can see really all the books, so analogic. In front of me is iPad, so digital. Virus and digital, both are really global. Now, I think that we need to share the language. We need just to share the opinion that we have to change our perception of the time. We have to change our perception of the space. I feel me just like a startup of mayo. It is very funny that I feel a startup of mayo, because the first time I was read mayo was in 1985. But I think that after virus and digital, we have the opportunity just to have a different approach in front of the dimension of the life. Just coming back to Palermo. Palermo passed from law enforcement to promotion of human rights. There is no city in Europe so culturally changed like Palermo in the last 40 years. 40 years ago, the mayor had the face of the mafia boss. The church was at the face of the mafia. The ministers, the government, the entrepreneur, they were all having the face of the mafia. After 40 years, I can say that mafia still exists, not only in Geneva, even in Palermo. But mafia does not govern the city of Palermo. You know what a tremendous change. And we changed thanking the mafia, because the mafia killed so much that obliged, helped, invited everybody to change our style of life. And now, for us, it's not enough to respect law. We want to respect and to promote human rights. We defend the human rights of everybody. We defend the human rights of homosexuals, of children, of whole people, of migrants, of everybody, because we believe in a slogan, I am a person, we are a community. I am a person, this alternative to the individualism. We are a community, is alternative to close the groups, to close the belonging. And peace, from my opinion, is the first human right, the first communitarian human right. Just like identity is the first individual human right.
Now, and on this trajectory of change in Palermo,
we changed
I
our
think
mind because we discovered the importance of human rights, starting from the fight against the mafia, starting in the fight just to respect the law. We finally discovered that in many cases the law are against the rights. And my opinion is that the Palermitans, after this fight, are much better than before. It's the same opinion. I think that thanking Osama bin Laden, the Muslim, will be better. And thanking Adolf Hitler, the German, will be better than before. Because we were obliged to open the eyes, to open the mouth, to open the ear. We were obliged just to see how terrible was the perversion of our identity. And I speak about identity. In my opinion,
this might allow me to just come into this here, because it connects to the notion of how Palermo as a city builds its activities in Palermo in a global partnership of actors, and also with respect to global movement. You have been at the forefront of a movement of, in fact, promoting a shift from law enforcement to human rights-based approaches in the city. So how would you judge, or what would be the sharing of, what would be your experiences on the importance of this connectedness of the city to a global partnership to help you deal with your issues that you have right in front of your doorstep?
I am a co-president and co-founder of the Global Parliament of Mayors that is based in Den Haag, in Holland. And I just participate to a lot of activities in Mexico, in Colombia, in Peru, in the United States of America, in Georgia, Caucasus, in France, in Germany, and everywhere. I think that we can send a message from the local level. I think in this moment, we need just to change our mind about three fundamental opinions. Identity. I am against the blood, the law of the blood. I'm not Palermitan because my father and my mother were Palermitan. I am Palermitan because I decided to be Palermitan. And after this speech, I have the right, I have the freedom to decide to become Tunisian and Jewish, or German and Hindu. Identity is the first of individual human rights. The second is state. We refuse the idea that the state is a closed space. If you speak with the young people, 20 years old, what is a state? It doesn't understand. For young people, only the world does exist, only the village does exist. What is in the middle between the world and the village is the enemy of the happiness. And finally, homeland. I refuse the idea that my identity comes from my father, from my mother. I refuse the idea that my homeland is chosen by my father and my mother. I have the right to decide what is my homeland, because believe me, only name of freedom, only name of love, I can have as homeland Italy. The musical national hymn of Italy cannot be heard. It's terrible, it's awful, but it's my choice. So I stand up, I put the hand on my heart, and I say that I love my homeland, because in my decision, my wife is not Miss World, but it's my freedom, it's my choice. So I will defend. You understand what I mean? We can just have a new idea of freedom. And speaking about identity, not based on blood. Speaking about state, not closed. Speaking about homeland, that is a free choice, you can understand how it's changed the idea of peace.
Thank you, Mayor. And these are, of course, also big concepts and big ideas that connect to a lot of academic research. And this is the perfect segue into the perspective on trust building and also international cooperation in the academic community. Marie Lorcel, this is the academic world is your home. And it is traditionally a home where visions are born, where new ideas are created. So how do you see the contribution from the academic community to this call, what Mayor Leo Luca just mentioned, on the recreation of notions towards identity, towards state, and towards homeland? Where would you see there the academic world's contribution?
Thank you very much, Hakim. Ladies and gentlemen, I think I would like actually to take the discussion from what we've heard, actually building on what we've heard. And Casilda launched us with this power of story notion. And indeed, I think that one of the roles of education is to reinvent the narrative and reinvent actually also what I like to call the software. It's not only about narratives, it's also the software of leadership and citizenship. And in order to do that, actually, we can build upon a notion that is well known, but has tended to be forgotten in the world of academia over the last century or so. And that's the notion of Bildung. I think we need a new Bildung, building on the notions that were pioneered in Germany in the 19th century by the German Minister of Education, von Humboldt. We need a new Bildung for the 21st century. And what does that mean? It means that we need to recognize that education has to go well beyond vocational and professional training. Education, tertiary education in particular, but I think this really applies across the board, from actually kindergarten all the way up to tertiary education. Is, I would like to quote here von Humboldt, who was saying a certain cultivation of the mind and character that nobody can be without. And this is certainly something that we all need to have today. Good, upstanding, and well-informed human beings and citizens. That's what we need to build for for a world that is very different from the one in which von Humboldt was living. And in order to do that, I think that education systems have to target this new narrative, this new software of leadership. And I would just like to, point to a number of elements of competences on the one hand and values on the other hand that we should be in charge of importing our students, future leaders and decision makers of this world. So a set of competences, this has been mentioned already. We need to empower our students to understand and to face complexity. I think that's it. We have to realize that we have to enter the world with a recognition that this world is extremely complex. All issues are wicked problems, multidimensional, everything is connected. A long list of challenges that, Akim, you started, and I will not go into, but they are all very closely and tightly connected. We know that, and we need to actually prepare the new generation to accept that. I'm a bit away from the traditional scientific vision of Occam's razor and simplicity and creating simplicity. We need to arm students and future decision makers with the capacity to understand and to face complexity in the long run. For that, transdisciplinary is key, but I could go on that later on. Another very important competence is that we need to train future leaders and decision makers to accept what is what is really clear in our world too, which is radical uncertainty. We're coming from a world where we talked about risks, and risks is measurable. It's in a sense manageable. Radical uncertainty is not, and we have to face the reality that the world in which we are going to be living in the coming years is a world of uncertainty and not a world of risk. And for that, obviously, we need different tools from the ones we have imparted our students. One very important tool, which actually is carried by social sciences, maybe more than by what we sometimes call exact sciences, is critical thinking. A third important competence is responsibility. We need to, recognize that leadership is about full and total responsibility and not about limited liability, which has been a bit the character of, I would say, the 20th century. The 20th century, and here again, I could explain a bit more, has been a century of limited responsibility, limited liability. And leadership, in the end, is about full-scale responsibility. And this is something in the order of competence that we need to actually push our students and future decision makers to have. Another important competence, and this is something that obviously in the context of International Geneva will resonate, I think, is a competence to collaboration instead of competition. Competition is certainly a mechanism and a competence that we've imparted in the education system, and this is something that has been with us for many, many decades and years. And I think we need to actually shift gear here and refocus our mechanisms, our processes more towards collaboration. A few ideas about the types of values also that we need to impart through also pedagogical transformation. A very important one is courage. And this is really against, here again, number of decades where the dominant, value has been prudential functioning. We need to rediscover deep courage. We also need to make the value of humanity resurface, where we've been moving towards transhumanity and the focus on technical solutions and artificial intelligence and other kinds of mechanisms as a superior mechanism. We need actually very urgently to reinvent and to rediscover the value of humanity that comes together with another important value, which is the value of empathy. Empathy, which here again, is a bit the counter value to the one that has been very dominant with them and with us since the 1980s, the value of greed and selfishness. So courage, humanity, empathy. And in the end, all those values and competences lead us to rediscover the difference between audit society and trust society. And this really goes back to the theme of this discussion. Audit is very different from trust. And in order to move towards a trust society and, kind of leave the audit world of the 80s, 90s, and the 2000s behind us, we need to work on all those different dimensions of this software of leadership and decision making that I tried to outline for you very briefly. Thank you.
Thank you, Marie-Laure. It also, I think, this roadmap which you outline is also a call to your own academic community. That academic community needs to become more into the center of society, where many academics have been in the so-called ivory tower. But in times of so fundamental change, academics need to be there and help the rest of society building these bridges between understanding complexity and building bridges between all these sources of knowledge. Perhaps we can, if you allow, we go to one former student of the Graduate Institute to see whether all the tools and all the elements which Paolo has learned and had taken with him from Geneva have really helped you, Paolo, to deal with all of the complexities you have found in your position as Deputy Mayor of Palermo.
Thanks a lot, Professor Venman. First of all, I want to thank everybody, the organization, for organizing the Geneva Peace Week 2020. I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to be back at school, although I'm distant because I'm here in Palermo, dealing with daily problems, and it's very exciting. The message that that I shared already with Professor Venman some days before, and that I want to share in this discussion about peace building and about building trust, is based on my personal experience. I studied at the Graduate Institute of Geneva, and at the Graduate Institute, I learned a lot of important lessons about peace, about respect, about how to build trust and build peace in society, how a more open city, town, territory can help the people to be better. So to this extent, I can say, first of all, my personal experience tells me and suggests me that this generation, especially nowadays, that we're dealing with problems that need at the same time a digital response, because at the same time, the virus and the digital devices are both global. We are a generation, we belong to a generation that can really make a difference for the time being. And nowadays, I think one of the main questions that we should ask each other and pose ourselves is, what can I do to build trust? What can I do to build peace? What can I do? How can I be actively involved in this process for a better environment? And I think one of the answers that sometimes were not so clear when I was at school, when I was studying, is to approach politics once again. When you study and when you're at school, sometimes you can even feel like you're in a bubble, because you address many things from different perspectives. You have a lot of lessons, you have a lot of perspectives, points of view on many different problems. But at one point, you really need to shape, or at least to try to shape, your future. And this entails two questions. What will I be in the future? And how can I be actively involved in making the environment better? And one of these answers is to, once again, approach politics and be part of politics. In Italy, I can say, there is a specific problem, the trust towards institutions. And the very low trust towards institutions created a big discrepancy between the participation of this generation to politics and in political stages. And we have to intervene in this specific side. And I think this generation can really make a difference if, once again, we go into politics, we make decisions, we are part of boards that make decisions for everybody, because we have a different way of reading the society.
And this is, I think, a very important point. If people want change, go into politics and fight the fight. And that is something that a generation might have forgotten, that there is that space. Now, I'm turning to Claudia, who sits, you may not see it, but I see it. She was just on my left. How is the chat going online?
Well, we have a very active and very thoughtful chat going on here for our YouTube viewers, and we appreciate that. Some very good questions that have been individually directed to some of our speakers. I would like to perhaps present some ideas that are filtering up to the speakers to the next round of discussion, Akim, if I may. We had one very pointed reflection on the positionality of all of this peace building work. That there's something that seems a little bit neo-colonial about importing peace to countries that are often dealing with conflict because of the wealth that is being generated from these very sort of resource rich, but human development indicator poor contexts. So our audience would like our speakers to speak to that truth as possible. I think the second one, that's probably enough for the next 4 hours of discussion. But if we had time to also look at the notion of how do we link the people on the ground. So the beauty of Geneva Peace Week this year is that we're really reaching people from the ground who are on the front lines of all of what we're talking about. How can we link the international multilateral system that exists exactly to support and protect their lives and their dignity and their human rights to together make this peace building project a reality? Over to you and to the audience. I remain on standby to filter through your comments, so please keep them coming.
Thank you very much, Claudia. Maria Luisa, you have a number of questions cut out for you right there, but I think let me perhaps take on that issue on this connectedness between policy centers and the work on the ground, because this, in the 55-year history of UNDP, this is really your working theater. Building peace, supporting development in specific contexts. So how, from this perspective and this history, how do you see this notion that frames this this discussion on the how of resetting international cooperation?
Many thanks, Hakim, and thank you for inviting us to participate in this panel and for your question. And let me perhaps start by saying that COVID-19 has been a big, very, very big disruptor of human development, and particularly so in fragile contexts, where more than 76% of the poorest populations, and they are linking with Claudia's question, live and are already off track in meeting all the SDGs except maybe one or two. So through our network of country offices around the globe, we are monitoring its impacts on peace and development. And what we are seeing is a stark reality, because we are seeing that the pandemic has generally failed to halt violent conflicts, despite the United Nations Secretary General call for a global ceasefire. We're also seeing that the social contract between the state and people is being further eroded, reinforcing trends already observed before the pandemic. But the uneven COVID responses and their effects are further eroding trust. And this is the theme of this Geneva Peace Week. Further eroding trust in government and in service institutions in many places. And this is happening just at the moment when the trust is more critical. And we are also seeing that the virus is exposing deep inequalities and key social fissures in societies, further weakening social cohesion. And as a result, we're seeing increases in discrimination and hate speech, and at times responses of government curtailing and restricting freedoms, and in many places, freedom of expression. So in this, we would like to offer 3 suggestions, some of which have already been mentioned by previous speakers, as governments and international cooperation actors face hard choices in a context of global economic downturn. I think our first suggestion would be to maintain and sustain support to local peace builders, because they are credible intermediaries to building trust between citizens and the state, but also within communities. And it's particularly important to bring young people to the core of peace responses, because these young peace builders can play a key leadership role in preventing violence, training their communities, and innovating new peace-building technologies. The second is to invest in social cohesion, because locally led solutions through local leaders, civil society, faith leaders, women and youth are not only key to the COVID response, but also to overcoming deficit trusts. And it's about supporting locally grounded networks and trust that exist within societies and which are capable of managing conflicts and preventing tensions to further escalating. And the third is that we should not let this crisis go to waste. It's really the moment to promote systemic change and to put people at the heart of the peace and development response. We can no longer go back to normal, as it were. We need to build forward much better. So this is an opportunity to pivot towards supporting inclusive and resilient societies through inclusive policies and institutions which are based on human rights. And their conflict-sensitive approaches are vital, as Hassan Pierre was telling us when he was describing so clearly the situation in Sahel. So again, let me just conclude by saying that it's time to redouble efforts to conflict prevention and peace building.
Thank you so much. And I particularly want to perhaps pick up the notion of these locally grounded networks that came out of Pierre's contribution. The notion of the bigger vision of having, in fact, a vision of a pedagogy that goes beyond simply one single sector. This multi-sectorial approach that on the one hand comes out of a Bildungs approach that has a long intellectual history, but that in the current day and age for actors in the international system is so important to really work across the nexus and across the different sectors and institutions. Now, allow me to turn us now to our last panelist, Jörg. You have had a life of experience as a diplomat. You have worked in so many places, and diplomats, if there is one profession, you are trained to speak to everyone, because this is what diplomats do. You speak to everyone from different countries. You speak to everyone in your society. So you are the perfect profession, to what Leo Luca said, to be the new narrative. So how, from a diplomat's perspective, how do you go around this building trust in an era where there is so much disruption? There is so much also tension between major powers, and you are a diplomat of a relatively small country.
Thank you much, Achim, and thanks for having me on the panel. This is really exciting, and what I really like about this particular panel is the diversity of participants. And can I just say, among friends here, a special shout out to the city of Palermo and her officials. I was, as a diplomat, involved in discussions on migration when, after the so-called European migration crisis in Palermo, was such an important voice when we reached out to the city level, and thank you very much for that. Listen, I would like to claim that diplomats have a special expertise or skill, or that's kind of our craft, to be able to speak to everybody, and I think that's a basic skill again that we need to do our job, and I think we need more diplomacy. We're probably not going through a time right now where we are the most respected profession and the most called for profession. I think we need more than less diplomacy. I think we also need some modesty from the diplomats' side. I think we need to understand that we are not the only ones, and that we need to work in concert with many others who bring expertise and skills to the table that are important to construct a wider peace. I may come back to that. Now you call us a relatively small country. I disagree respectfully, Joachim. We are small in size. It's true we don't have political power, but I would say we are at least a medium-sized actor, player when it comes to peace. You know, we have traditional experience. Peacekeeping may be not the first thing you think about when you think of Switzerland, but you know, I was a peacekeeper 30 years ago, a Swiss peacekeeper. It exists, and we have actually around 250 people on the ground, Swiss peacekeepers. So we have experience in traditional peacekeeping, although peacekeeping, of course, has evolved tremendously over the last years and decades, and not least also takes a much broader approach today to peace than just no combat. We have, I feel, a lot of experience in conflict prevention, in building up, or like as an honest broker, where I think the fact that we are not big and powerful helps us, because nobody would think that we have a hidden agenda when we get involved. The fact that we are neutral helps. We are not seen as being part of a big, powerful bloc. The fact that we are universal, meaning that we talk to everybody. There's nobody we're not talking to. We are ready and able to talk to everybody. That helps us to fulfill this role as an honest broker, to get involved in peace mediation. And I've through the time of my career as a diplomat, and you pointed it out, it's been very long already. I've been at this for quite a while. I've seen us becoming more and more involved. We also have been very involved in the recent conceptual discussion on peace building and sustaining peace. Again, taking a much broader approach to peace, looking at all the elements that are needed to preserve peace, to reinstate peace, and then to continue building a resilient society that would be able to save, to keep the peace. We have some practical experience. I was myself, when I was in New York over the last 5 years, involved with peace building. I was chairing a what we call a country configuration, looking into the situation of one particular country. In my case, it was Burundi. And through this practical experience, we participated in the conceptual discussion about where to go with the peace building and where to take a sustaining peace. And again, I think it helped us that we are not big, but also that we are not too small. So we still are able to have a certain amount of resources, to have Swiss experts in the field, to do activities anywhere, to bring this together and to continue to build on that discussion.
But if I may interject just there, you are also not just having all of these attributes and these experiences as a country, you also have a global platform in front of you, which might be called International Geneva. So by having that platform within your country, how with all these kind of these opportunities which you mentioned on neutrality, on good offices, on being a small country among relatively large confrontations, what are your visions to use International Geneva to reset international cooperation?
I was just going there because those who know me expect, of course, I knew that I would not speak on Geneva. In fact, you're quite right. And I think besides being not too big and not too small to do this, the fact that we are a host state in Geneva is an important factor. And Achim, you and I, we go together a few years, and we've been at the beginning of your operation here. And it's exactly an illustration of what we're trying to do in Geneva. We're trying to make use of this very rich biotop that International Geneva is, with actors of so many different categories, international organizations, all the missions of the member states that are here, the academia that we see represented here today, the non-governmental organizations, to bring all these actors together, but also on the different sectors, at least as important, because we've been realizing more and more that, as I said before, peace is not just the non-existence of combat. Peace is about development. Peace is about human rights. Peace is about health. Peace is about all these things. And all that expertise exists in Geneva. Now it's our vision, and I think we share that with many of you here, and it corresponds also with this new broader concepts of sustaining peace and putting the focus really on conflict prevention, to try to bring these expertise together. And who else than you, your platform, the Geneva Peace Week, is a better illustration of that. Can I just, one more word, and I'm sorry for taking so much time, but the neo-colonialism that was mentioned in one of the questions. With my modest experience I had over the last years, I would very much subscribe to that we have to be very careful not to, come to a situation, be in a region or in a country, and bring ready-made fit for all models and try to impose them on the people on the ground. We can offer support, we can offer models, but we always have to look at it from the perspective of the people who have gone through the crisis, who are facing new challenges, and they have to be the master of their destiny. There's no other way. late in my years as a diplomat, I'm ever more convinced that we have to be very careful. I completely subscribe to that.
Thank you, Jörg. And I see my colleagues waving at me that, of course, we're going terribly over time, but I will still use the moderator's prerogative to allow each of us to have perhaps concluding reflections about how we can strengthen this value added that Jörg just mentioned on International Geneva and its connectedness and its humility in a sense. In a way to reset international cooperation. And perhaps, Marie-Laure, I pass the floor first to you. How do you see the value added of International Geneva, perhaps from the perspective of the Graduate Institute, and perhaps also in light of the vision you just outlined on Bildung?
Yes, let me actually jump on Ambassador Lober's last point on our, the need to be careful about the neo-colonialist visions. I think that where Geneva has probably a very particular role to play is that actually Geneva and Switzerland is not an empire in any sense of classical sense of the term. And from that perspective, is probably the right place, the best place where we can deploy this critical thinking type of perspective, this collaborative type of perspective, where we are going to learn from each other and co-construct solutions rather than actually take solutions from somewhere and spread them somewhere else, but really build on this kind of mutual in a sense, culture and tradition to create a safe space for people to co-construct common solutions on an equal footing type of basis. So it sounds a bit, lofty maybe and idealist, but I still believe that if there's a place where this can happen, it's here, nowhere else. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marie-Laure. We pass the floor to Leo Luca. How from Palermo, how do you see a value added from a place like International Geneva for your work?
I repeat human rights, and I think that I wish to remark two issues. The first, against any old and new colonialism, we need deeply based local culture of human rights. It is the role of the mayors, it is the role of the cities. We're just to promote in any way, even against the law of our country. I based even in fight against the law of my country, my culture of human rights. Respecting the constitution, don't worry, but not the law, because sometimes the law is against the constitution, especially when the state law is against the human rights, migrant or homosexual, women or children. The second, the role of education. I think is a really important role of education, because as Marie-Laure Sall said, she spoke about competence and responsibility. Competence and responsibility are exactly the issues of the education. It means the role of education is to let the vision to be transformed into domestic and daily values. The role of education is to let the vision to be transformed into domestic life. It is exactly the role. So the two roles of mayors and of teacher is exactly to let the vision to be concrete and daily. Probably you have understood that I am a former professor in the University of Public Law in another geological area, because I wish to let you notice that I have the numbers the same age of Paolo Petralia. Paolo Petralia and I have the same numbers to indicate our age, 2 and 7. So
on that note,
we are both 2 and 7 years old.
On that note, Paolo, please do come in for a final reflection.
Yes, for me, Geneva was crucial and key even for my new political career that just started up. The message is that what really makes cities open are different factors. In Geneva, there is a kind and a specific kind of openness In Palermo, you find another one. And you have to make sure that you use those tools and that openness in different ways for the same objective, which is a better environment, a better world. So, for example, in Palermo, nobody would say that, but in Palermo, we have the longest extension of the fiber around the whole territory. And this means that we are an open-minded city when it comes to digital, because we give accessibility and connection to people. Is this another way for building peace and trust? I think it is. We all think it is. So we have to use different kind of openness in different cities and territories and make sure we can use them the right way.
I have a feeling there is a special relationship building between Geneva and Palermo through this call. But also perhaps we can take this forward to between Geneva and the many other cities around the world that are showing leadership. And I just want to flag that there is the Geneva Cities Hub that is particularly dedicated to build these bonds and relationships in the coming years. Maria Luisa, please, your final reflections on Geneva and its value added in this resetting of international cooperation. You have to unmute yourself, please.
As you know, the UN Secretary General talked of a network multilateralism, and we believe that Geneva is a clear example of that due to its exceptional density of global governance stakeholders and also a long history of cultivating inclusive and multi-stakeholder collaboration. So, and I think the Geneva Peace Week actually is an excellent example of that, where you have all this incredible number of actors from different sectors and civil society, academia, international, getting together to try to advance the agenda forward. And in a way, in our view also, the important thing not to forget is that all that is meant to provoke a transformational and concrete contribution to change that has an impact on people's lives. And that's what would continue to make it relevant and to keep us humble in light of the challenges that we face ahead. Thank you, Akim.
Thank you so much, Marie-Louise. Pierre, we started with you. We are going to conclude with you. What are your views on, particular perhaps from a mediator's, from a field-based perspective, on where the real value added of Geneva is as you are trying to rebuild trust in the face of so much disruption?
Well, let me start by saying that I'm also a former student from the Graduate Institute. And something I learned is the importance of interdisciplinarity, as Marie-Laure Salle mentioned earlier, and also of interdependence. It reminded me, after the Hiroshima bomb, everyone was joyful except one voice. And this one voice was Albert Camus. Albert Camus, in an op-ed in Combat, is in the newspaper and the Daily Combat, has written, man has to choose today between to destroy himself, to commit suicide, basically, or to live together. And I think we are reaching that point again. And when I think about, for instance, I was talking before about Sahel. You know that in Sahel, and that makes a link with Palermo possibly, and Geneva, that two-thirds, according to a UN report, two-thirds of cocaine which grows in Latin America and is being sold in Europe goes through Africa. So the question of interdependence is key. And I believe that we need hubs, and Geneva is a key hub and needs to remain so.
Thank you so much, Pierre, for these reflections. Now I point to Claudia. I'm sure that the chat is exploding with all after this discussion. Claudia, can you give us a feeling of what the discussion has been?
Well, indeed, the chat was not exploding. There was sort of a resonance amongst the global audience who agrees with what is being said. What we heard especially was the appreciation of humility that has been coming across in your messages, the reflexivity, both for international practitioners as well as for academics. So looking at things from a reflective perspective. And then finally, the continuing request to work really with local people, local voices, and not just as the token local participation, but truly as co-leaders and co-designers for peace.
Thank you so much, Claudia, for reflecting these comments from the audience. Now, I would like to thank all of you for participating in this opening discussion of Geneva Peace Week 2020. And if we would be in an audience now, this would be the time for the roaring applause. So I will clap, and I'm sure everyone else at home in his places. And with these words of thanks, I will hand back to Claudia and Danson. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Achim. And now we're going to give you an outlook for the week that's ahead. This year's Geneva Peace Week program is substantively rich and even more diverse than ever before. This year's Geneva Peace Week, we have over 500 speakers. That's 500 different perspectives that are coming together to discuss on critical issues from over 100 countries across the world, sharing knowledge and good practice from the front lines of peace. Our cutting edge program, which has already begun this morning, includes 70 live sessions. That's 70 live sessions that you can attend from today until Friday. And also the digital series. This is a new innovation for Geneva Peace Week this year. Whether you're on the way home from work or on the way to work or going to walk your dog, you can listen to pre-recorded content, podcasts, videos put together by our partner organizations. And also, we want to let you know that these are available on all major streaming platforms. So on YouTube, Spotify, on Google Play Store and the Apple Store as well. These are accessible not just during Geneva Peace Week, but beyond the week itself. And these conversations on peace will continue to build our collective peace-building efforts. So we thank you. I'll hand over to Claudia.
So the Geneva Peace Week program this year has been organized into 8 thematic tracks, reflecting what our organizers propose as priority peace and security concerns. The first that we have to mention, there are 8, they're all equally important, is what works in peace building, where we showcase innovative and effective approaches that are proving to have a positive impact on peace. The second is building a culture of peace. We're looking at storytelling, as we heard with Casilda just now, theater, films, and media, and how these different ways of talking about peace can support our capacities to reflect critically and thoughtfully on how we engage with the public and private narratives around peace.
The third track for Geneva Peace Week is a horizon scan for cyber peace, which will look at cyber operations, artificial intelligence, and digital technology in the field of peace and security. How trust in interpersonal relations, political institutions, international legal frameworks, and social media narratives are being affected by advances in digital technologies, and this will be considered during live sessions scheduled for tomorrow during Geneva Peace Week. On Wednesday, we'll be considering in depth our next thematic track, which is a new vision for peace building, where we'll consider the dilemmas and opportunities facing the international multilateral system, the realities of contemporary conflict, including gray zones between state and non-state actors, blurred lines between licit and illicit, and the securitization of political agendas and the politicization of international law. Join us for the first town hall on the new vision on peacemaking on Wednesday afternoon at 3 p.m. Another town hall meeting on Thursday will bring us together to discuss the 5th thematic track, which is harnessing economy for peace. This will examine how business actors can be key brokers of trust, agents for employment and trade, who generate peace dividends and greater prosperity. This discussion will gather the elements for a prospective policy agenda and ideas for a potential collaborative action in 2021.
Now, the practical transfer of peace-building skills has been a key priority in the development of our program this year. And in our thematic track of how to build peace, we'll have a series of workshops and skills transfer sessions, which are designed to support peace-building professionals and skills such as countering hate speech and racism, as well as the essential skills of empathy, listening, communication, and ethical leadership. As we all know, peace starts from within. And if we're going out in the world to build peace, we need to make sure that we are doing this in our own lives, in our own selves, before going forth. Now, on Friday, an issue that's of crucial importance to all of us is the environment, climate, conflict, and peace building. Now, this entire day will be dedicated to considering the role of conservation and environmental peace building, the development of digital technology and early warning systems in climate risk assessments and security frameworks. We're really seeing how conflict, peace, and the climate must be conceived of together. And finally, and in front of all of our minds, is the pandemic and how it has affected our lives. It's brought terrible hardship, adversity, and disruption. But it also brings a possibility for designing new ways of living, designing new ways of doing Geneva Peace Week. The thematic of building peace in the COVID era and beyond runs throughout this week. Together, we will consider how to surmount the current challenges we are facing towards new possibilities for peace. And it is in that space of possibility that we invited artists from the Good Chance Theatre and illustrator Majid Adin to show a collection of art, of poetry, of reflections from 39 artists and from 19 countries from across the world. They have shown us that through poetry, spoken word, and visual arts, we can better seize the possibilities of what we are currently living in this pandemic era. And they give us a hope for designing a better future. Now I turn it over to the video from the Good Chance Theatre.
The collective poem you're about to hear has been written collaboratively during lockdown by 39 Good Chance artists from 19 countries across the world. Now, as a premiere for Geneva Peace Week, you'll hear it read by some of the poets and live illustrated by award-winning Good Chance artist Majid Adin. And if you'd like to have a go yourself, join Good Chance and Comic Relief's Across Borders programme on the 5th of November for our workshop Poetry for Peace, where we'll be creating a collective poem and showing firsthand how we build solidarity and hope using the power of creativity.
Outside my window, I see a murmured whisper at first light. I breathe slowly. The earth releases her heady smell. Fence panels stretch and creak. A rabbit bobs along, nibbling the grass.
The sky is wide and private like my thoughts. شايفة السما لابسة الحجاب خلانة تكشف وشها وعيونها يملاها الأمل.
My little eyes play with the green tree through the window. When I moved to this new place, I didn't know this green garden was ours. Je vois juste des oiseaux et le soleil me visiter.
What endless hours we spend indoors. We have returned to grateful breathing, to childlike noticings of cows, to letters from lost friends, to make your own bouncy ball kits.
The mente, movimiento y música of the sky.
Outside my window, a girl sits on a wall. A toddler plants both coloured crocks on the towpath. Seeds float past. Still, the rabbit bobs along, nibbling the grass.
A cormorant appears like a magic trick, the percussive beat of wings on water, waking up the wind.
A blackbird guards his territory. He knows we have betrayed the swift, who can no longer find the sky.
We drew them through our windows with watercolor pencils. Drew hope as over 100 types of plant and animal, as freshly planted herbs in broken mugs, as rabbits nibbling the grass.
Outside our windows, our voices on the air like rain.
I'm grateful for the sweet smell of iftar at dusk.
For quitarse la ropa mojada al llegar a casa.
For laughter and long limbs dancing in the disco light.
For the silly jokes of that supermarket cashier.
For my little girl made of thin strings.
For opening my eyes, for my coffee machine.
For the time to listen to this bird song. It is so much louder now.
A magpie flicks her long tail to the sky, and night climbs through teal grasses. Perhaps this is the world taking a break from us, a boat floating in stilled waters.
We watch to see if the sky still moves with the recovered pulse of earth. The grey is specked with light, fresh leaves on each dry branch, rabbits bob along, nibbling the grass.
I'm grateful for this message from the universe, sung by thousands of birds.
Hope is a clear canvas. I draw my heartbeat on it.
Wow. And with these powerful words of hope, we turn Geneva Peace Week 2020 back over to each of you. Thank you for being a part of this journey. Before we close, we just want to give a few practical points for the week. If you're streaming in today and you haven't already registered to attend sessions during Geneva Peace Week, please head over to our website, www.genevapeaceweek.ch, to find out how you can engage and participate this week. Once you're registered, you'll receive a welcome pack, which will enable you to download our mobile app to access lots of interactive features, networking with other participants, asking questions, answering polls, you name it, the app is yours. Please submit your behind the scenes photos via our app. We're all separated geographically and perhaps we can't travel to Geneva as we normally would, but we still would love to see your faces and to see your home office set up and how you're engaging with Geneva Peace Week. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn using the hashtag Geneva Peace Week 20, that's GPW20, to join the conversation and share your thoughts on live sessions, digital series, and more. We thank you so much for attending the opening ceremony for Geneva Peace Week 2020, and we turn Geneva Peace Week back over to you for your engagement, your participation. Enjoy. Thank you.